Okay, welcome in, guys. So what we're going to do today is we're going to revisit the sizing segment, only instead of doing it in sterling silver, this time we're going to do it in gold, and we're going to show you a couple of different processes and a couple of different situations that you're going to encounter. Okay, so in the interest of expediting things, I've already chipped my solder. I've already ground the downsizings flush so that so they could size could be brought together and we can go ahead and do what we're going to do with them. So let's talk about one of the more common ones that you're going to see that can be a little tricky. All right. So here you can see we have a CZ ring, right? It's got a pink CZ in it. It's already been put in the flux. So, anyways, first of all, the stone is already loose, but we just sized it down, so I'm sure that made loosening the stone even more. So we're going to address that as well. We're going to cover adjusting stones and tightening stones and all of that stuff a little bit more in detail as we go along. So obviously, we know that sapphires, rubies, and emeralds take heat, and technically CZs can take a decent amount of heat, but we're not gonna cover that right now, so don't attempt that. Also, silver sizings and gold sizings are not the same as platinum sizings. Okay, do not attempt platinum without the proper safety gear. We'll cover platinum in its own section. Okay, so we want to keep the stone cool, and as a general rule of thumb, you're going to learn as you go along that some stones that need to be protected, you can shield them with a cup of water, and for other ones you want to get a product more like Cool Jewel. As a general rule, the thicker the ring, the less likely it's going to be able to withstand the temperature without the Cool Jewel. So on almost all of your lighter rings, you're not going to have an issue keeping it cool with a cup of water, right? So we've got our cup of water here, and I'll zoom you guys in on the process. The other thing that we're going to do here for you to see is we're going to weld this one. So the material that we cut out of the ring, we're going to weld back into the ring, just because I want to show you that you can weld even with your stone inverted in a cup of water. So you want the stone completely immersed. And bear in mind that this is a heat sink, so you don't want one too large or too small. The size you see here is pretty good. It's about the size of a $half and maybe an inch tall. Okay, and the heat will transfer from the ring to the water, which will evaporate the water. So you do want to be careful of that, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our torch ready. Now let me bring you over and zoom you in.
In the way, honey?
No, you're fine. Okay. So you can see the seam there. So we're going to take the piece of gold that we cut out of there, or it was one of the same ones on these rings. So it's going to work either way for demonstration purposes. We want to just gently heat this real quick. Okay. Get our hard flux on there because we want that nice clean surface to work with. I already fluxed the piece of gold as well. I probably should have heated that and gotten the flux to swell and then reduce, but it's okay. Notice I'm going a little bit higher up at the moment, and that's because I knew that it was going to swell and move around, and I'm trying to minimize that. So now what I'm trying to do is get it to just start melting. Boom. As soon as I see that the metal has started to melt, I'm going to reflux it with the hard flux. Okay. Now we're going to treat it just like an upsizing, where we're going to slide our forceps underneath and we're going to heat straight down. The flame's not large enough. You usually have to run your flame a little bit larger when you're dealing with a piece that's immersed in the water, right? So you can go back and forth, or you can go in circles, whichever you're more comfortable with, or depending on what you're trying to get the gold to do. In this case, I wanted it to distribute equally. All right, so if this were white gold, you have to leave it right there until it cools off, okay? It's not, it's yellow gold, so we can go ahead and take that off of there and then quench it in the water real quick. And then that can go ahead into the pickle. Remember, do not use steel or stainless steel when putting things into or out of the pickle. Use copper tongs only. All right, so that was the only one that we needed to do that with. Everything else, we're going to just go ahead and do. So let me show you real quick. This is going to be just a basic standard downsizing. All right, so get our torch going. These are sapphires, so we should have no issues with this. Okay, we got our flame going. Again, we're going to heat. And we're going to put our hard flux on there to make it nice and clean, fluff it up and let it settle down. And then you should have chipped a couple of pieces of solder equivalent to the size that you're trying to fill. All right. Boom, just like that. It's a little uneven, so let me smooth it out some. You don't have to, you could just file that away, but because it's a thin band, I wasn't worried about having to come from underneath to flow it down through. I could visually see that it was going down through the ring. So we'll set this aside and let it cool off. And now we're going to also do this dolphin ring. And this one, we're going to weld. All right. So we're going to get a little piece of material here, a little bit of gold. It's a 10 karat ring, so we're going to use 10 karat stock. Always bear in mind with 10 karat that it tends to hourglass, meaning that the sides will pull in as you're welding it, right? It doesn't seem to matter if it's a thicker ring or a thinner ring. It's just the nature of the material when you're talking about the 10 karat, right? So we have our piece of material here. And again, what I do is I lock the piece in the forceps, and then I go ahead and set up my torch. Don't forget, we're using a neutral flame or a working flame, whichever name you prefer to use. We're going to go ahead and heat this again. Oh, let me make sure you guys are on there. There we go. We're going to go ahead and heat this again and put our hard flux on. All right. Now, the cool thing about welding is you can have a piece that's a little larger or a little smaller than what you're working with. And you can either, when it gets put on one side, when you've fused or welded one side, from there you can either pull or you can push, depending on how much material you need. If you need less material, you gently pull away while it's molten. And if you need more, you gently push into it, right? I just happen to choose a piece that's basically the same size. So what you do is the edge of your piece of gold and the edge of the ring where you want it to attach first, that's exactly where you put the flame, all right? And you watch for them to become molten. That one had a piece of solder in it, so that just kind of made things easier. Normally, I would have cut off that piece. I would have come in from the side and pulled away and cut it off, right? But since it did that and it's just sitting there ready to go, we're just going to go ahead and heat it from above and let it drop down. The reason you're using the forceps is so the gold doesn't drop all the way through. It also acts a bit like a heat sink to try and help control the heat if you're not using the right size flame, okay? So that was some sizing for you today. We're also going to do stone tightening, prongs, so on and so forth. But that should give you a little food for thought and a little bit of practice when it comes to doing gold. And you will notice that the gold definitely responds differently than the sterling silver. The sterling silver, you basically want to heat up the bulk of the piece before your solder starts to flow. And with gold, you can go straight to the source, straight to where you want the gold to go, and boom, it's going to do it. Okay? So hang in there. More lessons are coming. I'm a little under the weather, so and I'm still relatively busy, but we're going to get you guys going with more lessons. We're going to also start a segment on the 3D printing to go along with the casting, which I will try to get filmed a little later on today. All right, you guys have a beautiful and blessed day. We'll catch you next time.